Hello and good morning. I'm a bit late, so please excuse me as I make some coffee just before I do that Bible reading today. So I'm going to be reading today from 1 Chronicles chapter 16. I'll do 4 readings today, but just for the morning, I'll just read one passage. And I thought what I'll do is I'll make some comments about that passage as well. But just before that, I'm going to make this coffee that my friend Joel sent me a couple of weeks ago. For those of you who know me, I don't actually drink coffee, but ever since I got this, I've become addicted, which is not very good. Yeah. Let's see. So I just want to leave this to brew while I do that reading, and I'll come back to it. Nice. That's cool. Full confession, I haven't washed this for a week. I've just been using it. Yeah. Okay, while that brews, let's read the Bible. Yeah, let me get my laptop. And like I said, if you're watching this, hello and welcome. It's 10 a.m. here in Cambridge, and I'm starting the day, as I normally do, reading the Bible. So that's what I'm going to be doing this morning. I usually read 4 passages from this Bible plan that takes me through the Bible in a year. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to split the readings into 2 parts. I'm going to read one passage this morning so that I can make some comments about it. And then I'm going to leave the other 3 readings to the evening time. And I'm going to read all those readings together and do another live stream for that. But again, hello to you if you just joined us. This is live. It is 10 o'clock, 10:03 here in Cambridge. I can't really see who's online, but hello to you if you are. Yeah. Okay, so this is from, I think, the Robert Murray McShane reading program. And if you can see this, I'm at 1 Chronicles 16 today. 1 Chronicles 16, and I'm reading from the World English Bible. So here it is, 1 Chronicles chapter 16. They brought in God's ark and set it in the middle of the tent that David had pitched for it. And they offered burnt offerings and peace offerings before God. When David had finished offering the burnt offering and the peace offerings, he blessed the people in Yahweh's name. He gave to every one of Israel, both man and woman, to everyone a loaf of bread, a portion of meat, it's making me hungry, and a cake of raisins. Verse 4, he appointed some of the Levites to minister before Yahweh's ark and to commemorate, to thank, and to praise Yahweh, the God of Israel. Asaph the chief, and second to him Zechariah, then Jael, Shemiramoth, Jehiel, Mattathiah, Eliab, Benaiah, Obed-Edom, and Jael, with stringed instruments and with harps, and Asaph with cymbals sounding aloud, with Benaiah and Jehaziel the priest with trumpets continually before the ark of the covenant of God. Let's see, verse 7. Then on that day, David first ordained to give thanks to Yahweh by the hand of Asaph and his brothers. Give thanks to Yahweh, call on his name. Make what he has done known among the peoples. Sing to him, sing praises to him, tell of all his marvelous works. Glory in his holy name. This is part of the song. Let the heart of those who seek Yahweh rejoice. Seek Yahweh and his strength. Seek his face forevermore. Remember his marvelous works that he has done, his wonders and the judgments of his mouth, you offspring of Israel his servant, you children of Jacob his chosen ones. He is Yahweh our God. His judgments are in all the earth. Remember his covenant forever, the word which he commanded to 1,000 generations, the covenant which he made with Abraham, his oath to Isaac. He confirmed it to Jacob on a statute, and to Israel for an everlasting covenant, saying, I will give you the land of Canaan, the lot of your inheritance. When you were but a few men in number, yes, very few, and foreigners in it. They went about from nation to nation, from one kingdom to another people. He allowed no man to do them wrong. Yes, he reproved kings for their sakes. Don't touch my anointed ones. Do my prophets no harm. Sing to Yahweh, all the earth. Display his salvation from day to day. Declare his glory among the nations and his marvelous works among all the peoples. For great is Yahweh, and greatly to be praised. He is also to be feared above all gods. For all the gods of the peoples are idols, but Yahweh made the heavens. Honor and majesty are before him. Strength and gladness are in his place. Ascribe to Yahweh, you relatives of the people. Ascribe to Yahweh glory and strength. Ascribe to Yahweh the glory due to his name. Bring an offering and come before him. Worship Yahweh in holy array. Tremble before him, all the earth. The world also is established that it can't be moved. Let heaven be glad and let the earth rejoice. Let them say among the nations, Yahweh reigns. Let the sea roar and its fullness. Let the field exult and all that is in it. Then the trees of the forest will sing for joy before Yahweh, for he comes to judge the earth. Oh, give thanks to Yahweh, for he is good, and his loving kindness endures forever. Say, save us, God of our salvation. Gather us together and deliver us from the nations. To give thanks to your holy name, to praise, to triumph in your praise. Blessed be Yahweh, the God of Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. All the people said, Amen, and praised Yahweh. Verse 37, so he, David, left Asaph and his brothers there before the ark of Yahweh's covenant to minister before the ark continually, as every day's work required. And Obed-Edom with their brothers, 68. Obed-Edom, also the son of Jeduthun and Hosah, to be doorkeepers. And Zadok the priest and his brothers, the priests, before Yahweh's tabernacle in the high place that was at Gibeon, to offer burnt offerings to Yahweh on the altar of burnt offering continually morning and evening, even according to all that is written in Yahweh's law, which he commanded to Israel. And with them, Heman, and Jeduthun, and the rest who were chosen, who were mentioned by name to give thanks to Yahweh, because his loving kindness endures forever. And with them, Heman and Jeduthun, with trumpets and cymbals for those who should sound aloud, and with instruments for the songs of God, and the sons of Jeduthun to be at the gate. All the people departed, each man to his house, and David returned to bless his house. Well, that's the reading for today from 1 Chronicles chapter 16. I'm going to make a few comments about this. How do we understand this? How do we apply this to ourselves? What is God saying through this portion of scripture today? But just before that, I need to get my coffee. Well, again, thank you, Joel. Thank you, Joel, for coffee. And I'm going to use this strainer that I haven't cleaned for a week. Oh man. Okay, there we go. As I do this, maybe I could make a few comments about 1 Chronicles. So 1 Chronicles, do you ever have people in your church who are back in my day people? People who talk about how, the church used to be so great, or things used to be so much better than they are today. Well, 1 Chronicles is actually that kind of book, because I'm not sure if you know this, 1 Chronicles is actually, in terms of order in the Jewish Old Testament, it's the very last book in the Jewish Old Testament. And that's interesting because, it's written 1,000 years after the time of David. Is it 1,000 years? I think it is. I could be wrong. But therefore, in that sense, 1 Chronicles 1 and 2 Chronicles has two R's to it. It's retrospective and it's also very rosy. Retrospective because it's written from the perspective of someone looking back at history. back in my day. Kind of like that person going, back in my day, the pastor was so good, the building was so new, everyone was so keen on evangelism. And in that sense, that's what 1 Chronicles does. It's a recollection of the heydays of Israel with King David and the temple and the kingdom of Israel. So that's retrospective. But secondly, 1 Chronicles is also very rosy in that you'll notice if you compare Chronicles with Kings or Chronicles with 1 and 2 Samuel, all the bad bits are taken out and only the rosy bits are left in. In that sense, 1 Chronicles puts all these rosy glasses on history and says, oh, wasn't it great then? But a true historian would go, hey, but what about those bad bits? But there's a reason it does this. Because, long after the heyday of Israel, of King David and the temple and the kingdom, things weren't rosy. And what 1 Chronicles does is it says to God, please do it again. Please reestablish the kingdom. Please bring your king again. And in that sense, that's what 1 Chronicles does. It speaks to a time when things aren't perfect. The temple was broken down. Israel had been attacked. They'd come back from exile, and things weren't as good as they had hoped. And 1 Chronicles reminds them that God is faithful. He's done this before. He can do it again. Well, that's just an introduction as I make my coffee. And we'll look at this particular book, particular chapter in more detail. Now, I have to apologize because I put a lot of sugar in my coffee. I put some sugar. I'm going to pour this kopi o. That's what we call kopi o. No milk in here. Oh, so good. There we go. Haha. Okay. Whoa, okay, good to go. So let's look at 1 Chronicles 16 in depth. So how do we break this up? Well, notice there's this phrase that keeps being repeated, forever, forever. They're worshiping God forever. In the songs, it talks about Yahweh's name being praised forever and ever, verse 36, everlasting to everlasting. But also, just after that, the priests are there to offer the burnt offerings continually, day and night, day and night. And what this talks about is the worship of God that goes on from day to day. Today, from this morning until evening, we should be worshiping God. But how our pattern of worship reflects that, how God deserves glory every day and all into eternity. And you can break 1 Chronicles up into 3 sections, 1 Chronicles 16 into 3 sections. And the way to do this, and if you have a Bible, this would be much better, is to see it like a sandwich. So there's the first bit and the end bit that's connected. And then there's a middle bit that's connected to the second middle bit and that's connected. And then there's the right in the middle, that's the meat of the sandwich. So it goes in 3 stages, part 1, part 2, part 3. And part 1 talks about David as the king. You could call him the forever king. So let's look at David first as the forever king. So in the beginning, they brought God's ark and set it in the middle of the tent that David had pitched for it. Now we know from chapter 15 that there were a lot of people. It's a long list of names. But if you read verses 1 and 2 and 3, it looks as if David is doing everything. It's not fair because, it says that David pitched the tent. David gave the offerings. David gave to everyone. It's like David is the only worshiper there. It's almost like saying your pastor is the only Christian in your church. It seems so unfair. But what it does is it puts David as the center of the reason why they're worshiping God at all. He's the king. And as the king, he is supposed to be the worshiper. So verse 1, he pitched the tent. Verse 2, he gave the offerings. And verse 3, he blessed the people. This is a king who isn't just there to do a job, to stand in authority over all the people. He is supposed to be the worship leader. David does that. And we see that in the first few verses, verses 1 to 3. But we also see it at the very end. So if you jump right to the very last verse of 1 Chronicles 16, verse 43, all the people departed, everyone went home after this worship service, kind of like after church, everyone goes back home. But what does David do? Verse 43, David returned to bless his house. Here's a Christian who isn't just Christian in church. He goes back home and he blesses his own family, his own people, his own loved ones with this blessing of God. Now, this is really, really interesting because the end of chapter 15, if I go back to chapter 15, what's waiting for him at home? In the end of chapter 15, Michal, the daughter of Saul, looked at David and despised him in his heart. So you see, here is someone who has just, led worship in church, maybe even preached in church, going back home and finding that his own family members are rejecting God, rejecting that worshiping. Maybe they aren't even in church, but David still goes home and he still blesses the members of his own family. That's wonderful, isn't it? That's really encouraging, and that's very convicting as well. For those of us who say lead others in worship, how consistent are we in that worship, in that faithfulness, in this, even doing this Bible study, not just when other people are watching, but at home, in front of your children, when you are a Christian there, as well as not just in front of other people. David was that kind of Christian, was that kind of king, was that kind of worship leader, the forever king. That's the first point. Another sip of coffee. So second level of the sandwich, so it's going from outside in, so David as the king. The second layer talks about the priests. So David isn't the only worshiper. He appoints many, many other worship leaders. Verse 4. He appointed some of the Levites. And we met these Levites back in chapter 15. And gives them a whole list of names. Asaph, Zechariah, Jael, Semiramoth. Lots of them with instruments. Lots of them are musicians. And musicians were considered worship leaders as well because they were leading people in singing and praising God. And the middle section is a whole song as well. And so they are priests, but they have to be Levites. David made a mistake in chapter 14 where he just said, let's just carry the ark. Everyone grab a side of the ark and carry it, and someone died because of that. But in chapter 15, he says, no, okay, God's law says, you have to have poles, there are certain specifications, it's meant to be part of the ceremony, and only the Levites can minister before God. So for this big event, and what he's doing is he's bringing the ark from Obed-Edom's house, hence he's one of the worshipers, back into the city of David. He is having this big procession with musicians and with priests led by all these guys in verses 4 to 6. And he gives us the list of these guys. And so that's great, kind of like your list of elders, your list of worship leaders, a list of leaders in your church who are all worshiping God, but helping others to worship God. And the lesson there is David can't do it himself. David can't do it himself because this is a worship that needs to get everyone involved. And part of that means appointing other people and entrusting them with God's worshiping and entrusting the right people, the ones whom God himself has appointed. Now that's the first bit on the top, verses 4 to 6. But again, there's that mirror section, this parallel in the second section below. And so we find the same names in verse 37 onwards. Asaph and his brothers, Obed-Edom and his brothers, and then Zadok the priest. But what are they doing there? So what happens in verse 37 is after this Sunday service, after this worship service, after this event, that you had where lots of people came, lots of people worship God, they continually worship God forever. And you see that phrase again, continually, again and again and again. So verse 37, Asaph and his brothers, where are they? Where are they? They are before the ark, continually, every day, doing the work, together with Obed-Edom as the doorkeepers. So the people who are in that one-off big worship service, they continue to do the same thing day after day after day. Also, in verse 40, verse 39, Zadok and his brothers were at Gibeon. This is another place to continually offer sacrifices again and again and again. So everywhere and anywhere at any time, there would always be this praise and worship of God. And the idea here is that worship is 24/7. It's not just Sunday. It's not just at a certain place. It is everywhere and anywhere with everyone at all times. God deserves the worship. And this is only possible through people. It is only possible through entrusting the right people who know God, who love God, who are able to lead others to worship God together. So we started with the forever king, that's David, and here are the forever priests. And I think it's talking about us, who are appointed as priests and a holy people before God, that everything that we do, not least drinking coffee, leading Bible study, watching this video, how are we worshiping God 24/7? That's the second point. Last point, another sip of coffee. Hello to you if you've just joined us. We're just looking at the end of this Bible study of 1 Chronicles chapter 16. This is very impromptu, so I'm sorry if it isn't very proper. I might make some mistakes. Do tell me in the comments if I have missed something, but this is really just a casual reading of a passage. And so the last section is in the center. This is this meat of this praise, and it's a song. It's a song that they sing on that day, verse 7, that David, ordained to give thanks to Yahweh. And this song is really interesting because it starts out with God's people, but it goes out into the world. It starts out with Yahweh, calls to the people of God. Verse 9, sing to him, sing praises to him, glory in his name. So it's calling to God's people, this call to worship. Some people still do that in their services. Okay, all right, you are God's people. You know who God is. Let's praise him together. And that's what he does here. In verse 11, seek Yahweh with all his strength. Seek his face forevermore. Again, that phrase, forever and ever and ever. And verse 14, he is Yahweh our God. His judgments are in all the earth. Remember his covenant forever. Now that's again talking to Israel. But as you progress towards the end, in verse 23, there's a shift. Because it no longer talks just to Israel, just to God's people, just in Jerusalem, but it talks to all the earth, to all the peoples who worship idols, calling them to worship God as well. Verse 23, sing to Yahweh, all the earth. Display his salvation from day to day. Verse 24, declare his glory among the nations and his marvelous works among all the people. Meaning, if anyone here who's watching this, and you're not a Christian, and you're looking at this video going, this is a crazy guy, what's he doing? Doing this video, telling me the Bible. I'm not interested in this. Or even more, this talk about worship, that sounds nice. You're singing songs, you're reading the Bible. God is almost saying, you should be doing this. All this display that they see in Israel worshiping with David and the songs and with the temple and with the with the choirs and with the offerings and everything. It's almost a picture of what the whole earth should do. Or maybe more than that. It's a picture of what you could be doing right now. It's essentially saying every worship service, every church service, every Bible reading is not just meant to be for people who read the Bible, people who are Christians, people who come to church. But it's meant to be a call of worship to the entire world. People who are not Christian are meant to see this worship. People who are not Christian are meant to hear these words and are meant to respond by saying, I wonder if I could be doing that as well. Because in verse 28, when it says, ascribe to Yahweh, verse 29, ascribe to Yahweh, it's not talking to Israelites. It's talking to the peoples of the earth. Ascribe to Yahweh, you relatives of peoples. Ascribe to Yahweh glory and strength. Bring an offering. Come before him. Worship Yahweh in holy array. Who is he calling to worship Yahweh? It's not Christians. It's not you and me if you're Christians. It's actually you if you're watching this and you're not a Christian. If you're watching this and you've never been to church before. Yahweh, this God, Jesus, is calling you to come and bow down and worship him. Verse 30, tremble before him, all the earth. The world also is established that it can't be moved. Verse 35 says, save us, God of our salvation. Gather us together and deliver us from from the nations. Blessed be Yahweh, the God of Israel, from everlasting to everlasting. And if you think about it, that makes sense. If God really is God, and if God is meant to be worshipped at all times in all places, it makes sense that God should be worshipped by all peoples. If you're watching this and you're a Christian, it means that we should not limit our worship, not just to one place at one time, and definitely not just to one people. Our worship is meant to be a call to those who do not know God to come and worship God. And if you're watching this and you are not a Christian, you don't know God, you've never heard this word before, when you look at a Christian, you're meant to think, what if I did that? What if I became that? What if I trusted in the God that they're worshiping right now? Yeah, so that's just a quick survey from 1 Chronicles chapter 16. Really should do this as a proper video because this is too long. But to be honest, it's less effort doing this. Don't have to edit, don't have to cut here and there, do anything. I can ramble on, and probably less people watch it, which is better. But yeah, so that's my breakfast, that's my morning reading. Hope that was helpful, and hope you have a good day. If you're in Malaysia, I've been watching lots of really good things coming out from Malaysia. I watched a bit of the Malaysia Blessing. There's this conference that's happening back home. I watched the opening last night. I think Brandon Ho was hosting that, and really, really good songs. I'm so ashamed. I actually never heard that song before. Malaysian Blessing. I know it's been on the internet for like a year. I haven't actually heard it before. It's so good. But also lots of other content coming out, all from Malaysia. Malaysian Christian Memes has this podcast happening. So good. I've been watching that. There's another one. I'm ashamed I can't remember the name of it. Something about speech bubbles. These bunch of Sarawak Christians doing this podcast. I watched the whole thing. That was so good. Also King Canvas. I recently discovered that. Really, really funny. Really, really engaging. I'm learning a lot from the way that that this person is doing things that are so punchy and so gospel-centered. I really love that as well. And again, all these is from Malaysia. And I thought, I'm a Malaysian. I should be convicted. I should be encouraged in the same way to produce, encouraging content. I need to end. I need to have my breakfast. Thank you for watching. Take care. God bless.